Good afternoon. It is wonderful to see so many people joining us virtually today for an incredible three-part series, Lunch and Learn, featuring the art and the spiritual spaces of Temple Bethel. I am Rabbi Jessica Spitelnik-Mates, and before we get to our incredible artist, I want to introduce to you the person behind so much of how the art was chosen at Temple Bethel, the chair of the art task force. But before all these most recent renovations, 11 years ago, the Sun Sentinel spoke to Susan Podolsky and asked her about all of this planning to build a campus out west, the Beck family campus. And Susan, in this article in 2009 in the Sun Sentinel, said, "We recognize how difficult it is for parents to bring their children east for education. The new campus will make life easier for people, attract new members, and serve the Jewish community with an educational campus that goes from infancy to adulthood." That spirit of Susan in that article in the Sun Sentinel of 2009 expresses the spirit of Susan at every moment of her role at Temple Bethel. At the time that was written, she had adult children and no grandchild yet. And yet she cared with all her heart and soul about every age and every congregant at Temple Bethel. She effuses love for Temple Bethel. And so, as we take this journey over the next 3 weeks of the art of the spiritual spaces, just as beautifully as we will get to know these incredible artists whose works, God willing, we will see in person one day, again very soon, you will also get to know Susan's diligence, attention to detail, love, spirit, and true devotion to Temple Bethel. And I can't thank her enough for being my partner in preparing this Lunch and Learn. And so I'm going to hand things over to Susan as we begin.
Advance. 3 years ago, Richard Bluestein, the chair of the construction committee for the renovation of our Schaefer campus, asked me to chair the art task force to put forth his vision that he wanted inspiring art to be placed throughout the Schaefer campus. It's been an honor to serve with Rabbis Dan and Jessica, Rita Diamond, Susan Stallone, Derek Hurwitz, Shana Martinoff, and 8 members of our congregation. Each brought insight, creative thought, and 100% dedication to the task at hand. Each artist was chosen for his or her expertise, and every piece of art was painstakingly deliberated in our meetings as we collaborated with the best of the best in their fields. From the moment you step through the doors under the new Slane family portico, symbolizing our Mishkan, our tent, and you see 3 tapestries that adorn our Minkoff Welcome Center, you come to our first mezuzah. But everything at the Schaefer campus was intentional, down to this mezuzah at the front door. And by the way, the same mezuzah at the front door of Schaefer is the same mezuzah at the front door at Beck, because we may be 2 campuses, but we are one synagogue. This artist, Advance, and all of the mezuzot that adorn and welcome people into the spiritual spaces, they were all fabricated by artist Talia Abraham in Israel, showing the connection that our congregation has with Israel. Advance. We also have in every administrative office and every nook and cranny opening a specially placed mezuzah chosen by the art task force, many of which were created by Joy Stember, an American metal and Judaic artist. So this gives you a few examples. Advance. Well, we're here today to meet David Ascalon, my friend since 2006. We are so fortunate that this artistic genius who created most of the art on the Schaefer campus is with us today. Let me share a little bit about David. David joined his father, Hungarian-born artist and sculptor and industrial designer Maurice, in 1977. Already a noted artist himself, metal sculptor and designer, David was originally trained by his dad, and then he went on to study and graduate from
Sorry,
the
yes,
Pratt
I muted
Institute.
myself. I did not.
His
follow
background
what I just said.
in stained glass, metal sculpture, architecture, and design, in addition to his Judaic studies, took Ascalon Studios to new heights. And David became an award-winning designer and also served as the past president of the American Guild of Judaic Art. Much of the studio's work draws upon David's passion to create art forms based on spiritual themes, usually using non-traditional approaches. For many years, his sons, Eric, worked side by side to produce award-winning interior sacred spaces like that of the Lincoln Square Synagogue. And for that project, younger son Brad, an industrial designer, joined the team. For 3 generations, David Ascalon and Ascalon Studios has undertaken projects throughout North America. The scope of the studio's work ranges from sanctuary design to design and fabrication of specific site work, donor recognition projects, and the design of interiors and furnishings for worship and public spaces. In addition, David has worked on behalf of artists' rights. And another little known fact, he's also a licensed private airline pilot. Advance. Jess?
We're talking to the sons, about his sons now.
So this slide shows David and
go
his
into
family.
the first question. Yes.
Yes.
So David, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. What does it mean for you to work with your children at Ascalon Studios?
Well, before I answer that, I'd like to thank the committee. I'd like to thank especially Susan and Barry and Richard, with whom I had a very close collaboration on the project. And I appreciate everything that they all, I appreciate the help they had given me throughout. So now, how is it to work with my children? You know, the life of an artist, unless he has some business sense, you've heard of starving artists, and there's some truth to it, because it seems to be that the brain is this for creative ability is on the opposite side of logic and business mindedness and all that sort of thing. So I had feared that any of them would go into the arts. Luckily, I have some business sense, so I was able to make a living of creating art. And my son, Brad, apparently inherited some of that talent. I should say a lot of that talent, because he's a very successful industrial designer. Eric is more geared to management and running the show. He was very instrumental in getting this off the ground on my end. And I should give a little credit to my little son. Little son is 45 years old. And he's also creative, but more in the music end of creativity. How is it to work with him? Well, it's not easy. You know, family is working together. Sometimes egos come in, and then arguments come in. So we all had our own niche within the business. Eric ran the administrative end of it, the sales end of it, the public relations, and the advertising, et cetera, et cetera. Brad, my middle son, who is the industrial designer, he always gave me a critique. I would send him designs and he would give his opinion, and that was extremely helpful to me as well. So working, as long as we're separated if we were both, Eric and I were both artists, we might have had a more difficult time at it. But since our domain was different, we were able to do this very successfully. So
Beautiful.
I
And we
enjoyed
saw
it.
your gorgeous children. And we saw your
Oh,
beautiful children
thank
in
you.
those slides there. This is actually my favorite slide. And it actually has aspects of two things, your beginnings and your current time, that reflect the incredible scope of art in your life. So on this slide, we have your father, Maurice Ascalon, hammering the scholar, the laborer, and the toiler as part of a pavilion in the New York World's Fair. And then below that, we have you and your son assembling COVID lucite intubation safety boxes. And so I'm going to ask you two questions that deal with these slides. So the first question is, and that's why your picture of your father is up here, how did your early life influence you and who you are and what you do? And the second question we'll come to after that is, how did that inform your action with COVID? So let's start with your early life and how that influenced you, and then how did that inform your most recent action, which you'll talk to about relation to COVID. So let's go back in time.
Sure. My father grew up in Hungary, in Szatmár, Hungary, which you may know is a very, very traditional Hasidic area. And my father rebelled. He grew up in a Hasidic home, but he rebelled, left home when he was 16 on his own, traveled throughout Europe, wind up in Belgium, went to the École des Beaux-Arts in Brussels, and he loved sculpture. And he brought that talent with him when he made Aliyah to Israel. He actually went to Israel just as a tourist initially, but then he met my beautiful mother. And 2 weeks after they met, they married.
Wow.
So that gave him an incentive to stay in Israel. And so he did. I was born in Israel, as was my brother, Adir, and my sister. Both of them are now gone. And my brother was an artist on his own right. He was a painter and a sculptor, and he worked he lived in Mexico with his wife. Adir was collaborating with the famous Mexican artist David Siqueiros on a number of projects. And so I grew up in that environment. My father was 26 in this photograph, and he did that, as you said, Rabbi, for the World's Fair. It wasn't the Israel Pavilion because there was no Israel at that time. It was 1939. So it was called the Jewish Palestine Pavilion. And he was commissioned to do those sculptures, which we use today as our logo. And proudly
wow.
so. And my father worked in sculpture, developed a company by the name of Podolsky, which originated the giftware industry in metal of Israel. If you've seen those green plates and ashtrays and menorahs and all these type of green patina bronzes and brass, it was originated by my father. And his things, and he started a company at one time. He had 100 employees working for him. And then we emigrated to the United States. My father was hoping to start, a plane is flying very low, so it's drowning my sound. I don't know if
We can hear you. We can still hear you.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, we just had the Blue Angels fly over
Oh,
our house.
they were here. They were here earlier, a
Oh,
couple of days ago.
So, okay, that's what the noise was. Getting back to this, I inherited, or I would say my father was my mentor. And I got interested not just in art, with which I was surrounded, but at the time my father was building a new factory. And this is going back to the early 50s. And we were living in Tel Aviv at the time, and next door neighbor was an architect. And I used to go to him to see what he was doing. And that really captured my imagination. And that's something that I was always interested in. And in fact, that's what I studied in Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. But being that I needed immediate gratification, whereas in architecture, you start and it's 2 or 3 years before you see anything going up. I went more towards the arts, where I found a niche creating primarily artwork for synagogues. And that included all types of metalwork. It included mosaics, stained glass windows, ceramics, a whole variety of things. So we always had the capability, if things were slow in one area, to work on another type of medium, in another medium. So, and actually, like, we started to do stained glass because there was a demand for it, not because I was especially interested in stained glass, but because there was a demand, and we would be hired to do, for instance, art doors, and then I would be asked, can you do stained glass? And I would answer, yes, I can do stained glass. So I hired someone who knew something about fabricating stained glass. And in, I think, 2 weeks, it took us to learn the whole Megillah. And so we started to design stained glass and fabricate. And that's going back about 25, 30 years. Anyway, we're doing a lot of it as we speak. Moving
Susan
on to
and
the
I
bottom.
couldn't.
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, well, it's amazing the Blue Angels just flew overhead, because I think that's in honor of healthcare workers. And Susan, who put this incredible PowerPoint together, could not have better timed the flight of the Blue Angels overhead with such attention to detail that we move to your incredible work that brought tears to my eyes when Susan shared with us these COVID boxes that you're making. So if you can talk about that.
Okay, I'd like to correct both of you, because it's in the studio, and that's what we're doing, but it's not me and Eric. When the masks are off, it's 2 different people, although we're all bald. The person on the right is my right-hand man, Bob Locke. He's been with me for about 20 years. He's a multifaceted artist. He does a lot of my metalwork, if not all of it. And he also does stained glass. What it is, by having a small studio, at one time we had 10 people, which was unmanageable. But when we average about 5 people in the studio. That was so each person in the studio, each craftsperson or artist was able to do a number of disciplines. In other words, like Bob, who's a metal worker, was able to do stained glass or ceramic work. And so it goes for the other employees. The person on the left is the gentleman by the name of Seth Perlman, who came to us with the idea of making these intubation boxes. These are, and having, being in a slow period because of the health issues.
A message from Brad.
Okay.
Read
because of the COVID-19 issue, things were very slow in the studio. And so I had that available, and Seth was making these boxes in his living room. And so at a certain point, he came to us and asked if we would mind making them. And of course, it was our duty to do this. It was not just to kill free time, but it was very timely and very fortunate for us to do this. Everything, the materials, the labor, the parts, the transportation, everything was donated. For instance, the plexiglass was donated by Lowe's Hardware. We had to get a special bending machine, plastic bending machine, that was donated by local hardware store. The transportation is provided by people in the area who are slow right now, and they have vehicles, and they were able to transport these boxes, some to Boston and some to North Carolina and so on. So we made probably around 150 of these, and we advertised that they were available for anyone that wanted them. So we got requests, and as long as we were getting requests, we made these boxes. In a way, I'm thankful that we're not getting requests, because hopefully that's a sign that less is needed at the moment.
Amen. Amen to that.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on. Oh, go on.
Hopefully.
Sorry.
Yeah, I could be very wordy.
I'm going to.
so-
That's okay. That's all right. I'm going to move on to the next slide, but it's amazing, your efforts. So on the screen here are some of your other incredible works that you have worked on over your career. And on the right of the slide is the Sanctuary Ark for Lincoln Square Synagogue, which is a standout in your career. Why are you so proud of this particular piece?
Well, it was, unlike working with Bethel, Lincoln Square Synagogue was a tough thing, because we had a committee of 26 people, and each one had a different opinion, and it was tough to work with them, but I was working also with the architect, who was very helpful and open-minded about it. So we came to the ark itself is made of not acacia wood, but cedar wood. It's a special cedar that comes from Italy, because I don't think there are any more cedar trees in Lebanon. So we had that. We made the doors in bronze, and the stone is Jerusalem stone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so I'm pretty proud of that project.
Susan, if you'll take over slide 9.
Yes. So in 2006, I now have a term for you, David. I call you the mitzvah mensch. I met you because Alvin Cohen of blessed memory asked me to find a stained glass artist to be able to create a series of windows for the new mausoleum, which was being constructed on the grounds of Temple Beth. It didn't take me long to find you after seeing your work and learning about you at the Judaic Artists Guild. And the more I've come to know you, especially with the last story of what you did during COVID, makes me realize that the title of mitzvah mensch is very befitting. Next, with advance. With working with Rabbi Dan and the Mausoleum Committee, we didn't have an art task force at this point. We asked David to set forth to create a series of stained glass windows for the first and the second floors of the mausoleum. And we chose with him the theme of L'Ador Vador. I'm not going to have the time to go through each window entirely, but as we scroll through advance, we felt that this theme of L'Ador Vador was very befitting to honor the memory of congregants and their family members. Advance. Advance.
I'm sorry?
No, I was talking to Jessica.
Oh, sorry.
But probably the standout in the mausoleum are your mosaics on the first and second floor. Jess?
Mausoleum is a sacred space. It is a place of mourning and a place of comfort. And Temple Bethel came to you in order to figure out how to take this space to both reflect the feel that we wanted in the mausoleum and the Jewish stories we wanted to convey. So these mosaics that are here, and we'll also see on the next slide, are incredible and are in our mausoleum. And I'll go back and forth between them while you talk about the physical process of making them and how your Jewish knowledge comes through in the details.
Okay.
David, so what is it like to make these mosaics? And Susan talks about how infused your Jewish knowledge is in all the details that are there. So if you can take us through that process.
Right. Well, the interesting thing is having gone through elementary school in Israel, which a non-parochial school, a required course, as would be math or science, is Tanakh. So I was always very familiar with the Bible, the stories of the Bible, the Torah. And so I had knowledge of the history, the history of Judaism altogether. So that I came prepared with into this business. But admittedly, I learned a lot just by doing and meeting with rabbis and discussing with especially things that are more associated with the Talmud and things of that nature. But I learned how to, for instance, in these windows, the one on the left showing a ladder, a ram caught in the bushes. The sacrifice of Isaac is, in other words, that's what I call the patriarchs, a window of the patriarchs, which the stars symbolize the covenant with Abraham, saying that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. The ladder represents the dream of Jacob of a ladder going up to heaven, and Isaac is represented by the sacrifice mount and the ram, the story of the ram. On the right are the stories of the matriarchs, where you have Sarah represented by the open tent, inviting. She was known as very welcoming of the stranger. The lower one shows a water well, and that would represent Rebecca when Abraham sent his messenger to look for a bride for Isaac. They came across Rebecca, the story of how she gave water to the camels, and the flowers represent the two wives of Jacob. Leah is represented by the flower, by the what's the name of the flower?
The mandrake.
The same as in Hebrew.
The mandrake. Can you talk a little bit
Mandrake, yeah.
before we move to the next slide about the process of making these mosaics?
Yes. Okay, so the process is basically, it's tesserae tiles. It's glass, it's made in Italy, and it's very tedious in that you have to put one tile at a time, one little tile. So a typical mosaic of this nature may have over 1,000 little tiles.
Wow.
So that's basically the process. You would, just as kids learn how to make these tiled ashtrays in camp, it's pretty much the same story. You create a drawing and you paste each tile by hand. So
Wow. I'm going to move us on. These are two other pieces. We just wanted to show that are etched in granite and mounted in brass letters that are two very resonant readings that are read often at funerals. We have Ecclesiastes and we have the 23rd Psalm here as well. And I'll tell you, when I am leading funerals in the mausoleum space, that I have people read from the very the granite brass rendering of the 23rd Psalm. So they are drawn into the art in this moment of comfort that's here. We're going to move on to like something that's really exciting to talk about as we talk about art, which is we have all this, cerebral and in the air and visioning, but what happens when it arrives? So Susan, let's hand things over to you.
So for so many months we anticipated, we kept calling David, when's it coming? When's the truck coming? And finally he called and said, it will come. And everyone stood outside of what was to become the beginnings of the Schaefer campus. As you can see, it's not done here. And then advance, the boxes come off the truck, crates come off the truck. And our entire maintenance team and Richard Bluestein, chair of the construction project, was there to greet the art outside, inside, putting it up, examining it, making sure it was in perfect order. And they stood in awe. And I have to tell you, when Jason Reeser uncrated the first piece of art, and he is our director of facilities, tears welled up in his eyes. Advance.
So speaking of Jason Reeser, he is our director of facilities, an incredible human being. And this is how beautiful we all work together at Temple, staff and lay people and leadership. Jason is the head of the building. And as he was hearing the plans, and he's very visual, very talented, and this wall was going to be blank. And he said, Beth El is vibrant and alive, and you need color on that wall that hits people when they come into the building. And you can't see them, but we have two producers on with us, Ross and Amanda. And Ross just started in January to work in our youth and ed department, but he's now producing for us. And that story was told to Ross, and one of the things that made him drawn to Beth El, that everyone's voice is heard. And so we come to these three tapestries of love. They were designed with David's input, and they were made by Flanders Tapestries in Belgium. And so, David, we want you to talk a little bit about your history of collaboration with Flanders Tapestries in Belgium. And God willing, when we're back in the building, you'll see them up close. They are stunning.
Well, the story begins with Susan and Barry, and of course, and Richard. And he insisted on having it of a certain size. Well, it took me, I don't know how many months to locate all the weavers in the States. Nobody had a loom large enough to create these humongous tapestries. And I found, to my knowledge, the only one that had a large enough loom is this company, Flanders. And it was, there were many concerns in terms of how critical the photograph, the drawing, the renderings that I created would be to this, to get this fine detail in a pixelated form that is not going to be obvious. So they interpreted the drawing. They took the drawing right off the original renderings and created these. It came rolled up. Each tapestry was rolled up, and then we stretched it, basically on a stretcher, a wood stretcher that was hung this way. I want to compliment Richard on this occasion, because his idea to recess not just the tapestries, but some of the other artwork works beautifully. I was very impressed with the job that was done, the construction, the artwork, the architecture that was created in this space, not just the art. I love, for instance, the ceiling. I'm not sure where it is, but I saw the photograph of it, and it's very impressive. Sorry?
So let's move on. We're going to move on so you can see, Susan can talk about these 3 tapestries of love and why they're so important.
So when we had our very first meeting with David and Eric Ascalon in Boca Raton at I think the Beck camp, and maybe it was the atrium at that point, way before we were even close to finished with construction, David asked Rabbi Dan and all the members of the art task force a very pointed question. What do you envision at the first entry point to the newly renovated Temple Bethel? And Rabbi Dan responded, it's got to be about love. Our congregation is all about love. And there was not one member of the art task force in that room that did not wholeheartedly agree. And then it was, how should we show love? So the first one is, you shall love the stranger as yourself. But David, I'd like to ask you, and I'd like everyone to kind of focus in on the letter Shin. And I'd like David to talk about why he felt the letter Shin should be placed not just in every tapestry, but actually in every piece of the artwork at Schaefer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So that came about to my recollection in trying to depict God in some way without using what Michelangelo did in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, with God sitting on a cloud pointing his hand to Adam. That would be verboten, as far as I'm concerned, in the synagogue. But so how do you show God in an abstract form? And I was thinking about the Big Bang Theory, how everything was tohu vavohu, the no form, no shape, and that swirling or burst of light is what connected me to God, associating that with the Big Bang. So this swirling effect we used in every one of the mosaics, every one of the tapestries, and then Rabbi Dan looked at the aloe plants on not in this particular one, but in the mosaic, for instance. Oh, here you could see them. The 3 points. The 3 points create a shin, and that was the observation that Rabbi Dan made. Furthermore, if you go to the next window, the next tapestry, here, loving your neighbor is the intertwining of 2 trees. They're separated, but they're intertwined as 2 elements, and that suggests love your neighbor. the other tapestry, the Torah, love your God, is represented again by what I call the Shekhinah, or the whirlpool that you see above, as a connection to God. And here we also see the aloe plant with in 3 points, and suggests also the word Shaddai, the Shin. We've also used the Shin in the mosaic. I guess we'll come to that.
Yeah, we'll be there. We actually wanted to bring up, and it's so interesting you mentioned Michelangelo, because that was exactly our line of questioning here. These beautiful stained glasses had sat in the Schneer member lounge in the original temple, and then they've been moved, gorgeously mounted and lit up to the Beit Midrash, getting a new life again. And that anthropomorphic or literal art of Michelangelo versus the stylized or figurative of some other pieces. Why, when you made these stained glasses for us, did you choose to portray that more literal way that were Michelangelo you alluded to there? And these were done, Susan, how many years ago were these done? About
2009.
2009, but they got new life in the Beit Midrash. They were gorgeous where they were originally, and they're gorgeous where they are now. So how did you choose to portray the biblical
Well,
Abraham welcoming and Ruth and Naomi here?
Yes. In the mosaic, in the mausoleum, I showed the welcoming, not so much the welcome, but Sarah as with the open tent. And here it's I'm not even sure why I went in this direction, but I thought it would be difficult to portray Naomi and Ruth in any other way. I was thinking maybe in an abstract form, but again, I don't think it lends itself very well to understanding what you're looking at if it's strictly abstract. So we went in that direction, and I think that was really almost a request. It just tended to go in that direction.
And they're gorgeous where they are in the Beit Midrash. They light up.
Thank you.
We're going to move, just because we want to make sure we get through everything. We're going to move this Hanukkah that's in the lobby of Bethel, and then we're going to move for the next few slides. Susan, if you can talk to us with David about the Social Justice Center.
Sure. So one of the other values and missions of Temple Bethel is the work that we do in the area of social justice. So we wanted to have a social justice center be the second focus once you step through the doors of the Schaefer campus. But notice our social justice center not only has the beautiful art of Escalon Studios, it has a very utilitarian purpose at the bottom, because we made sure, and Richie made sure, that we would have cabinetry so we would be able to store all the many donations that are brought to our temple every day of the week. So how do you present the idea of a synagogue involved in social justice? I think this endeavor was probably the most collaborative piece that the art task force took on. David suggested a word cloud, and we said, that sounds like a great idea. And Rabbi Dan said, we have to do it in Hebrew and English. David said, no problem. How are we going to get to the words? And each of us looked at each other in the room and said, this can't just be our ideas, our opinions. And so what we did was we asked every staff member, all of our clergy, every arm of the temple, from sisterhood to brotherhood to committees to parenthood, what are the values that are most important in Judaism and to you as a member in Temple Bethel? It was a brilliant exercise because so many were repeated. And then we said, okay, David, here's your words. Now play. So my question to you, David, and the result is brilliant. You chose different metals, you chose different fonts, you chose different sizes, which we collaborated with you on the sizes. Tell us how this came to be.
Well, you can't lose sight of the fact that it has to be art. And some of these descriptions just do not allow themselves to be configured as in an artistic way. So the words mean a lot, and I just thought it was a good way of doing it. The Hebrew is the one that really stand out. The English, of course, is more subdued, using a different shade of color for the metal, which is aluminum in this case. The Hebrew is brass. What I found a very practical solution, and that was Richard's idea. We were going to fabricate the whole thing, including the wood, in the studio. But how do you match that to the wood that's on the rest of the wall and the cabinetry? So he came up with a brilliant idea. Why don't we make the board? They shipped it to us in the studio. We mounted it and then shipped it back, and it fits right in with the rest of so all the grain runs together with the surrounding wood. So that worked out very well.
And Richard, Susan, if you want to say a word about Richard Bluestein, who we keep referring to, who is also amazing.
As I mentioned when I first opened about the art task force, it was Richard who was and is the head of the construction task force. Richard is an architect. He's a Temple Beth member, and he volunteered to be the project manager, the overall project manager for everything that happened on the Schaefer campus. He was our go-to person for everything. And we were so lucky that he had the time to also serve on the art task force, collaborate with David and me and everyone else.
So Susan, and we just have about 10 minutes, so I'm just gonna,
so very quickly, these are the entry doors to the Beck Family Chapel. And underneath, embedded in the floor, is what we call the well, which is an etched glass piece. Above it, you saw circular lights. So you're almost looking at the heavens with the well, where so many people in our Torah and Bible stories have gathered. So there was great significance, because as you'll learn next week, the Beck Family Chapel becomes Richard's and Rabbi Dan's Garden of Eden, but no more about that today. So these handles, another collaboration by the Art Task Force. We went through handles that look like mini Torahs. We went through handles that look like shins. We went through handles that look like olives, and many more. And nobody was happy.
Can I, Susan, I texted Susan from the Statue of Liberty,
Yes.
where I was with my kids, because the door pulls were torches, like Lady Liberty's torch, in the midst of this handle conversation. We were obsessed
with a door pull for all of the sacred spaces that would be meaningful. And we kept turning it back to David. And all of a sudden, David said, you know, I've used this swirl in all the tapestries. He hadn't even really begun on the mosaics, which we're about to see. Maybe we could make door handles, door pulls for all of the sacred spaces. Little did David know that that would be a very challenging decision on his part. So
Indeed.
David, briefly, can you tell us about some of the challenges that you had in fabricating these door pulls?
Absolutely. In fact, I have it in my notes, not that you were going to bring that up, but as a challenge. I think this was the biggest challenge. It started with the finish. And I didn't know that because these are cast pieces. Now, because of the porosity of the material, and during the process of powder coating, which is the final finish, some of the porous material from the porous material came out and blemished the created blemishes on it. And it was a back and forth kind of thing. Finally, we got it right, and everything
We
is
did.
well that
And
ends well.
David, they're spectacular. And
Thank you.
they really give everyone a sense that these are the doors to a spiritual space compared to the handles that we use on other spaces. So because David mentioned it, and I only have a few seconds to talk about it, we had an atrium that used to be an open courtyard, okay? No roof. In 1992, I believe, yes, 1992, we had need for a second social hall. So we put a plexiglass roof on it, and it was pretty good until 2006 when it started to leak. So we needed to put a real roof on it. And we all looked at the roof. And again, this is before the art task force. And Rabbi Dan said, we got to do something that has meaning. And there began the sculptural interpretation of the 5 books of Moses. Whenever I'm giving a tour of this campus, I take people into our Mir Family Center. I say, so what do you think this is? You'd laugh in terms of some of the responses. But what it really is, the 5 books of Moses taking off like the wings of the Torah to give us that sense of spirituality, which brings us to our first mosaic. So again, the brilliance of Richie Bluestein, who said every piece of art has to be set into a niche. Our community mosaic is actually the cornerstone of our community living room. Why this theme? It's an easy answer. As Jews, the importance of community is paramount to our culture and our beliefs. This exquisite freeform mosaic, think of the mosaics we just saw in the mausoleum. This is totally different. It speaks to our connection with one another and our connection to God. It's strategically placed, by the way, across from our new digital recognition wall, which gives recognition to all of the members of our congregation who have given with their hands and their heart. Remember, every decision that we made was made intentionally. This mosaic is a timeless message about what it means to be holy, and that is to be part of a community.
And then the next mosaic is learning. And so just quickly, David, because we want to be able to get to the tree of life, how do you synthesize the personality of a synagogue, of the community that you're working with, and the synagogue's goals into your work? And if you have any reflections on Temple Bethel as you reflect on that.
Yeah. Well, when I visited the Beck campus, the atrium suggested to me what this would be like, because you have a trail in between the landscape on both sides. And it's, I've created sort of a plants and things that are that I saw in the back atrium.
Wow.
And it leads, in your case, in reality, it leads to a daylight on the far side of that atrium. In this case, I've shown a group of people, children, adults, an old person in the middle, walking towards this, again, the swirly Shekhinah, as I call it, with an open book to suggest learning. And again, we see the 3 pointed shins in the plants in the foreground.
And this beautiful mosaic is strategically placed across from our sanctuary, where we learn all of the time from our amazing clergy from the Bima. But around the corner is our new tree of life. So what does a congregation do when it runs out of leaves on its tree of life? We build a new one. But we wanted this one to have 3-dimensionality, which David so beautifully crafted out of bronze. And he asked us at one point at a meeting, how many leaves you want? And Rabbi Dan quickly said, we have to have 969 leaves. And every member of the art task force turned to Dan and said, what? And he said, the oldest person in the Bible, Methuselah, lived till 969 years. And you can go count them one day. Advance. So David didn't just work at the Schaefer campus. He also provided us with a very inspirational arc for our new Kahila Center that opened in 2019 at the Beck family campus. When I conveyed to David that our religious school was divided into 12 tribes, he came up with a stellar idea, and he represented the tabernacle for students. David, tell us about the jewels and the wings.
Well, okay, we can't, the practical end of it is you can't place full-size Torahs into the, what we think was the shape of the tabernacle, which is low and long. So we had to use a little artistic freedom in this. And we created an ark with, as you can see, the two staffs that the tabernacle was carried by. They were actually made in acacia wood, as I recall, but that suggests, in one way, it suggests the tabernacle, and of course the wings of the cherubims are on top of the ark, and essentially it's actually the wings are should be the other way, but it looks fine this way too.
So in truth,
as you can see in the rendering.
David,
I'm sorry?
David, in truth, you are represented at both of our campuses in our mausoleum. You're everywhere at Temple Bethel. And I speak for Rabbi Jessica and for our entire congregation. Thank you so much for being here. Jess?
I'm in awe. I love art. I love your work. And that realization, I never knew until this lecture that in the learning mosaic that you actually represented the Beck campus and the walkway in the Beck campus. And David, I think that says everything about your heart and who you are, that you were able to do what we worked so hard to do, that the Beck and Schaefer campus are one synagogue, Temple Bethel, and that you so got that and so understood that and had such a feeling of who we are that you did that. And I can't thank you enough for sharing of your art and your love and the stories. I can't thank Susan Podolsky enough, who worked so hard to put this together. And it's just been incredible. David, we want you to stay safe and well up in the Northeast where you are, and God willing, to know that the world has, someone like you who works in one realm and quickly pivots to help in the realm of the pandemic is just amazing. And we have a huge turnout. We want to acknowledge, we have so many people with us today on the class, and just thank you all for being here, and just everyone stay safe and well, and thank you.
Thank you for including me in the full meeting, and be safe, everyone, be safe.
Thank you. Thank you, David. It was incredible, just incredible. Susan, we got through the hour. We did it. That's
we
great.
did, David.
All right, fantastic. All right, okay, we're gonna log off and say have a good afternoon.